Well, the beautiful thing about sailing is it can be whatever you want it to be, right? It can
Right.
be relaxing. It can be fast and furious, but also just the high from Hobie Cat racing is unbelievable. To me, that was the most exhilarating type of racing.
Welcome to the Passages from the Heart podcast, a podcast made by an everyday sailor for everyday sailors. We talk everything from day sailing to racing to cruising to camping out on your boat and everything in between. It's time now to raise the sails. In this episode, I sit down with my childhood sailing friend, Brian Nicholson, and we talk about how sailing has shaped our lives and what sailing means to us. From his earliest days of sailing solo on his laser to crewing aboard his family's San Juan 24, and then later racing as an adult on his own sailboat, a Hobie Cat 16, Brian shares how sailing and boating in general have influenced not only his own life, but the lives of his wife and his children. Come join us as we rekindle the magic that happens out on the water and explore the soul of sailing.
I'd like to welcome my dear friend, Brian Nicholson, to the Passages from the Heart podcast. Brian, welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to
So
be here. This is a blast.
yeah, I'm totally digging your background. Can you tell us a little bit more about what is that I think it's probably like a real picture, right?
It is. This is part of it's a little bay on the St. Croix River that separates Minnesota from Wisconsin. So we spent
Cool.
we spent a lot of time on this body of water.
Typically speaking, when I do these podcasts, I like to sort of kick them off with a story, your story, and specifically your origin sailing story. So, as far back as you can remember, how is it that you became a sailor?
Yeah, so it's really a family sport. My grandfather, my uncle, my parents, they all started sailing small boats in on small lakes in Iowa. And from there, as you get older, you start to get interested and you want your own boat and you want to be able to sail. And it's just like when you're a kid and you get your first bike and you're able to just cruise around the neighborhood. When you're hanging out on lakes all the time, you want that same experience. So yeah, it all started with my grandparents and just moved on from there.
Cool. I kind of remember, just to kind of give our listeners a little bit of a background about my relationship to Brian and why I invited you to be on this show. We actually did kind of start out as little bitty kidniks sailing
Yeah.
together. I think I want to say I was around 6, at least 7, maybe 6, when I might have met you on one of the lakes before you sailed at Rathen.
Big Creek, right?
Yeah, we're Big Creek. I think that is the first place. But at that point in time, I don't like I said, I don't really remember what boat you had at that stage because it wasn't the San 124, right?
No, both at Rock Creek and Big Creek, the family sailed Y flyers.
Okay, and can you tell me and our listeners? I don't really remember. So is that a dinghy sailor, and how long is that, and what kind of rig does that boat have? I don't really know.
Yeah, it would be if you were racing in a class. Probably the most common boat might be a scow, right? So 16 to 18 foot sailboat. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
They were
And
cool. They were cool because the scows were the white flyer was a monohull, but the scows kind of had a rounded hull. But the
yeah,
white flyers were more rectangular and I don't want to say boxy because they weren't really boxy, but they were more sleek. And but it was it had a rectangle bow. So yeah, it was an interesting, cool looking sailboat.
And so was the rig on that, did it have a head sail or was it just a mainsail only?
No, I had both. Yeah.
It did have both. Okay. And so how many, like two adults on that probably?
Yeah.
So kind of
Yeah.
bigger than a laser.
Oh yeah.
So your parents had one and your grandparents also had one of those?
My grandparents had one, my aunt and uncle had one, and my parents had.
Okay. And so I kind of remember we talked about this before too, sometime in the past about racing. And I really was hoping we can get into the nitty gritty with that. Cause I've been wanting to get someone on the show who's got some racing experience. And I know you do, not just with the Y Flyers, but Hobie Cats, I believe too, which is totally like out of my realm. I've never been on
Totally
one.
different, a total different sailing experience or racing experience, or yeah,
Yeah.
it's it definitely different from laser for sure.
So with the Y Flyers, did you all race in the same sort of circle, or were they in a like were you all part of the same kind of, I don't know if it was a yacht club or racing club, kind of like when we were kids there was a cruising fleet of Iowa and we had our own racing series every season. So was it something like where it was only for that type of boat where you were racing, or was it like with our races in cruising fleet of Iowa where you could have any sailboat really and
Yeah.
race and participate in the
I
races?
actually think it was the same group. My grandfather was I remember him being the president of the group at the time. I remember seeing some certificates, which I may have somewhere, showing exactly what it is. But I'm almost sure it was the same group. So yeah, you would see. I remember being down at the lake, and you'd see the Y Flyers, and you'd see the what would be sea boats and flying juniors, or better known as FJs. But yeah, anything that would fit into that. I want to say 16 to 18 foot range. They could definitely race together.
Yeah, that's cool. So, and those boats, I'm assuming, were probably just dagger boards, right? Or does it have like a little?
Centerboard, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so, how long was it before you guys hopped into the San Juan 24? Because that's the boat that I remember the most with your family, and I just was always so jealous because that boat was such a cool boat and it was fast. So I remember when we would have regattas and our little racing series at Rathbun, you guys were always kicking butt, from what I recall. But how old were you when your parents went from the
The Y Flyers, yeah.
the Y
Yeah,
Flyers
so
to that boat?
yeah, and my grandparents, I know, were racing those boats probably before I was born, or when I was born. Um, so when you say you were at Big Creek from, kind of that 6, 7 year old age, I think we ended up getting down to Lake Rapin and being on the San Juan 24. I'm gonna guess around 9 years old.
It's fun to think back to the days then because, for me at least, those are some of the best days of my life. I think looking back as a child, like places where I think that for me, sailing became, as I say, how I first learned what a feeling of peace would be like, being out in the water with the sails up, the sun out. And even sometimes, like, not that it happened frequently, but there were times when we would go out for a midnight sail, or
Oh,
probably wasn't literally midnight, but when there was a full moon, that was always such a magical thing. I seem to recall that there was a time, I don't know if you remember this, but do you remember Gordon and Marie that had the big catch called Princess? And that
oh
boat
yeah.
was probably like 40, I don't know what that boat was. I want to say at least 42,
They
maybe
didn't pull
bigger.
it out of the water, if you
Yeah,
remember, in the wintertime. Yeah, it was so
yeah,
big.
it had probably the bubblers, I would imagine, on the
Yeah,
dock then for it.
yeah.
But I remember there was at least one time when we went out on that boat for a full moon sail, and there was a whole bunch of people on there. I actually specifically remember, I think, your stepbrother, Britt, being there. But I remember being on the starboard side, kind of like amidships, like just kind of sitting in the area where you would, walk up to the bow of the boat and just kind of looking out on everything and just thinking, wow, this is so magical. I don't think I was probably more than 9 or 10 or something at the most. Do you remember that? Were you on that particular voyage?
I don't remember that trip. But I do remember either Gordon or Ron on, it could have been their San Juan 28. I don't remember exactly. The only thing I can remember is somebody falling overboard.
Oh, somebody did?
Oh yeah, and it was one of the two of them. And when all I remember is the panic and then the laughter.
So it was probably, if it was a San Juan 28, it probably would have been Ron's boat, right? Because when you say Gordon, you mean Gordon Brown, right?
Yeah.
Not the other Gordon with the princess, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, Gordon Brown is a family friend of both of Brian's family and my family. And Ron, actually, bless both Gordon and Ron's souls because they've passed on by now, very unfortunately. But Ron, at the time back in the 70s and the 80s, was one of two that I recall local sailboat dealers.
Right.
And he had his shop in East Des Moines, and he sold Catalinas, San Juans,
best tubes.
Oh yeah, and then
lasers,
mini fish, sunfish.
Yeah.
Did he sell Hobies too?
No. There was a separate Hobie dealer.
Okay. So anyway, he was kind of one of the guys, the sailing guys in our neck of the woods. And very sadly, now there's nobody here for that, which I was kind of hoping to become with my sailboat dealership, to become someone who could be in the community to help people who have sailing ambitions, etc. But anyway, I digress once again. Getting back to that night where someone fell overboard, that makes me think of something that is very different in my life as a sailor as it was when I was a kid growing up sailing. And that is that I'm sure you remember that it was a pretty big party scene with the adults.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, I think I remember telling you stories about being in the galley of Valhalla, our Accent 26, and mixing gin and tonics. And this little girl.
We were the best 10-year-old bartenders there were. That's right.
And I just think to myself now, like, I can't imagine that parents would have their children do that. But I mean, I don't know. I don't have children, so I can't really speak to that. But it just seems to me, looking back,
I have children. I have got children, and I don't think that when they were 10 years old that they ever made me a drink. Now, they might have gone and gotten me a beer, but never in the, cutting limes and putting the right amount of tonic in and, just the right amount of gin. No.
Yeah. No, it's so funny. Like, I don't know. It's funny how times have changed in some respects. Now, of course, I don't have alcohol in my life for various reasons, but it's nice for me in that regard. But, when I go to the boat, one of the things I kind of complain about sometimes, and that I get frustrated with down at the lake, is that there are a lot of people who are 3 sheets to the wind. And, it's fine to enjoy and stuff, but I think when you're anchored out in the cove and you're done for the day, but when you're actually taking the boat someplace, probably not such a good idea. Although I don't really remember too much drinking going on during sailing when I was growing up, except
not for during racing.
Yeah, well, for sure not doing racing, but I do remember passing up beers to my dad also while during the day, because he was a big beer drinker back then too. But the racing,
and I also think too, as a sailor, the DNR, they never went after sailors that had cocktails. Even today we see, and there's sailboats on our river because the river expands into a bigger area of water, which is considered the lake on the river or lakes on the river. but it's, they're always going after the power boaters, you know, and it's probably based on speed.
Yeah, I think so. I would say that when I see the DNR pulling people over on our lake, that it's power boaters. I don't think I've ever
Right.
seen them next to a sailboater. But it's interesting because there is so much more traffic on the lake than I remember as a kid. I mean, it's a whole different sort of vibe there now because there's so much more development with the camping grounds and the docks. There's so many more docks that have been constructed to accommodate the rise in popularity of boating. I would say power boating, houseboating, pontoon boating,
Yeah.
but not so much sailing. And speaking of pontoon boats, we have to talk just a
Oh
bit about
no, you're gonna throw me under the bus. I knew it was gonna happen.
No, it's all good because boating is boating. As long as you're out in the water, dude, that's all that matters, right? I
That
mean,
is true.
because I was just telling my sister yesterday, one of the benefits of having the small sailboat, my legacy, my compact legacy, that I didn't really have the perspective to see this at the time. I bought the bigger boat, the compact 23 last summer.
Yeah.
I've been wanting to get a boat like that for a long time. I got it finally. But sailing that boat after having started sailing the smaller boat, the Legacy, which is 16 feet 6 inches, it was like, whoa, man, this boat takes a lot longer the 23 takes so much longer to get it ready to leave the dock and get out to go sailing. It requires a lot more physical strength to sheet in the jib and the mainsail. And when you're docking to catch the boat, it's like, whoa, yeah, this boat's way heavier than the other. So it's funny how it puts things into perspective like that. And though I had so appreciated my first legacy, I sold the boat thinking, I don't need another sailboat. I have this bigger one now. That's what's so cool about boating, is that there's, a boat for everyone and a boat just about for every type of body of water, for every kind of activity, whether it's fishing or water skiing or, sailing, whatever. But that legacy is great because it's so easy for a single person even to rig it, to launch it, to sail it. Whereas my 23, got to have someone to help me raise the mast. There are people who have made devices to
Sure.
raise the mast, which for one person, I don't think I would probably ever attempt that. I mean, never say never. And then also, as far as rigging the boat, it's more complicated than the Legacy is. So I'm not going to knock you for wanting to explore and get into using a pontoon boat because you know what, it has its advantages. And
Yeah, interestingly enough, Shell, part of it was where we lived. So my first boat was a mini fish. Then I got a laser, and then and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, but transitioned into the Hobie Cat. But I actually moved down to Lake of the Ozarks, and Lake of the Ozarks is a flooded river down around Osage Beach, and they have huge banks. And I took my Hobie Cat down there, and it is not a sailing lake unless you have a very tall mast. And there were some that were down there, but it's a power boat lake. So at that point in time, I had to sell the Hobie Cat, and then I transitioned to a power boat just because I lived on the lake, but the necessity of it. And that's kind of where I first realized, ooh, wow, owning a power boat's pretty dang easy compared to owning a sailboat, because of all the things that you just mentioned. But I didn't, you know my story. I didn't get completely away from it. Even when with the Tritoon that I have, I went out and bought a day sailor and had that for about a year. So my ideal, if once I retire, I want to live on have a house on the lake, nice sized lake, not too big, not too small, and then just have one of each. Mast is always up. The thing is, ready to go.
yeah,
Keep it
yeah,
easy.
yeah. No, that's how I feel too. I feel exactly the same. In fact, we actually had a power boat that we purchased during COVID,
Oh yeah, I remember.
like so many other people did. But
Yeah.
we had power boats. It's so funny that you say the Ozarks too, and I know we've talked about this, but we used to boat at the Ozarks as well. Not sailing. We had a 26-foot Carver Santa Cruz, and we also had purchased before that, several years before that, we had a little Wellcraft center console fishing boat that we used to use when we lived out east. And that's, it was just my husband's parents had a beach house, and we used to keep our little 16-foot Wellcraft at this marina, and we'd go out for the day and flounder fish and just float after we got to where we wanted to in the bay and just kind of hang out, and then come back in and get some jalapeno poppers and a beer.
Yeah,
So we got to the dock.
exactly.
And it was great. And then when we got to the Midwest and we lived near, well, not near, we were, oh my goodness, I think we were almost 4-hour drop because we were coming from St. Louis. So what is that, like 3.5 hours, I think, to get to Lake Ozark. And we were on the other
Yeah, I was going to
side
say
of
it
the lake.
depends on that
Yeah.
place. That lake is huge, so it depends
Yeah.
on where
I don't
you were actually
remember-
going to.
I don't remember what mile marker it was, but so there was it wasn't Shooters 21 was further down. That was like obviously mile marker 21, but this one was way
We
up
lived at
a lot
20 and a
further.
half.
Yeah.
We were drivable to Shooters, and we just had to pop out of the cove and go left, and we were at Shooters.
Oh, that's cool. Well, we kept our boat at this really kind of eclectic, I'll say, marina. It was called Blue Anchor Marina, which no longer exists. And it was really cool. They had a lot of old wooden power boats, like these big Owens. I think Owens was the brand that I remember. That was the boat next to us. Just gorgeous, all solid wood boats. Talk about a lot of get your toolbox out.
Right.
That lake, looking back, I can't ever say that I ever remember seeing a sailboat there. But yeah, I mean, I've been to the dark side. And I like it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
like I said, it's all about getting out on the water, right?
Yeah. And I'm blessed, living in Minnesota and Wisconsin, a lot of great lakes to boat, sail, or, powerboat, whatever. But what really happened is when we had kids, we joined a boating club, and that was on White Bear Lake. And White Bear Lake had a boat factory, and actually that's where I think it was the Johnson Boat Factory, and that's where they made Sea Scows or Scows. And but we belonged to a boat club there, and with the boat club we could use 2 or 3 sailboats. You could use their kayaks, or you could use their pontoons. And quite honestly, what ended up happening is that the kids really enjoyed the pontoon, and that's kind of how it went from there. And then we went up to we bought a 33-foot cabin cruiser. So a lot of those experiences that you and I had as a kid, sleeping on the boats and anchoring and swimming, we were able to give that same sort of experience to our kids. It's just that we did it under power.
Yeah, I think, like I said, to me, I feel real blessed too, to use your word, about having the opportunities I've had to be out on the water, whether it's under sail or a power boat. And, I think the experience of being out in nature, and so just, kind of camping out. One of the things that was my favorite thing to do is wake up in the morning on the boat. Actually, and one of my most favorite things too was sleeping on the boat. I used to love that as well. But
Not during a storm.
Well, I don't remember a whole lot of storms, to be honest with you. I do remember a couple, but I always felt so cozy in my little quarter berth.
Your little cubby.
Yeah, I was in the starboard quarter berth, and it just and the other thing that's so funny too, as a kid, looking back, I so trusted the boat. I don't know why. I never thought about the boat sinking or doing something. I don't know. I never worried about it breaking. Now, granted, I was just a child, but I also was a teenager. We had that boat till I was about 20, I think 22. So wow. I kind of missed that feeling a little bit, to be honest with you, as opposed to how it is for me now as an adult. And I guess it's just because, when you're a kid, the buck doesn't stop with you. Obviously, your
Right.
parents are the ones who are gonna figure something out if you get dismasted or you start dragging in the middle of the night on the anchor or whatever. Whereas now, all that stuff falls on my shoulders, right? Because I'm the captain. But yeah, I mean, from a perspective of a kid, I think I trusted the boat. I was never worried about getting injured or hurt on the boat. You know, I didn't worship my father. That's kind of not the right word to use, but I guess I trusted my dad that he knew what he was doing too with the boat. I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity to, spend almost every weekend in the summer doing that. When you're a kid and you're in school and you're like kind of going through the motions of going to class and there's the cliques and the cool kids and the whatevers. And when you were on the boat at the lake, it was just like none of that mattered.
Not at all.
You were just you, and people didn't care about that kind of stuff. At least I wasn't cognizant of the fact that people cared about it at the lake like I did when I was at school, right?
Right.
So
Yeah.
but it's that connectivity with nature and just kind of getting away from the routine of regular life, I guess. But I'm so grateful that I've been able to have these experiences and that they have stayed with me almost through my whole life. There were some years where I wasn't on the water, and I'm sad that I missed out on a lot of years with that. How about you? Did you? I mean, I know I'm thinking that when you were talking about this experience with your kids, they were probably pretty young at that time, or was this kind of like how you and I like did it all the way from like elementary school all the way up to high school sort of thing?
Yeah. So, so when they were really young, we had the boat club, and then we transitioned into the bigger boat, and the kids weren't in a whole bunch of sports. So, we would take that boat everywhere. And what's the cool thing about being on the St. Croix River is the further south you go, it runs into the Mississippi. So you could, not only could we stay on the beach at some of the state parks, but we could also go down to the different towns that had marinas, and we'd spend the night and we'd go hike with the kids and go out to dinner and, have them tube and stuff and wear them out and, do the whole thing all over again. So that was a real cool experience. The only problem is when you, when you have a boat that is that size, the costs of maintenance is ridiculous. The slip rental and winterization, summerization, all of that is ridiculous. As the kids got into sports, we quit using the boat. Like I'd go down there by myself and I'm like, oh, it's nice, but then you're like, it's kind of boring too. So I sold it, and then, we bought this Tri-Tune, which was the kids were getting older. They'd bring their friends, and it just became kind of like a little party deck, that we could take out. It was easy. And now we like it too, because normally we'll go to different lakes in Wisconsin and Minnesota, and we'll rent a cabin for the week, and then we get to bring our boat with us. So, that was a thing when we were growing up. You always went to the same lake,
Yeah.
which is, as you know, we loved. But it's a whole new experience when you get to go to other towns and other lakes and
Yeah.
just see what, that community is all about.
Yeah, for sure. I think I had little tastes of that during the summers when I was an older kid and into my teenage years, because we would go up to Minnesota or Wisconsin, way up to where Lake Superior is, and we would charter for a week. Usually we would charter tartans. Like I think we mostly chartered like tartan 33s, but there was one summer where we chartered a tartan 42 with our mutual friend Marnie's family, who also grew up sailing with us. And then one year we chartered also a non-such, I think it was a 30-foot boat, which was really cool because that boat is just a single mainsail it's like got a wishbone boom. I guess you would call it a cat rig boat in a sense, but it's not really. I mean, because it has a different rigging system. At any rate, it was like cruising. You would go from one place to another, and I really like that. And kind of what I'm hoping at some point in my future that I can do with my 23-foot boat, or like another reason why I got the small one again, this other Legacy. I got an older one. It's a 2008. Like what you do with your Tritune, I can trailer it anywhere. And that was kind of my plan, is to take it to different lakes around the state of Iowa, share my experiences like about each of these areas, and from the sailor's perspective, and say, hey, these are some things that are great for sailing. Here's some things you might want to check out, like, restaurants or
Yeah.
I don't know, that sort of thing. And it's just the freedom, I guess, of being able to, it's kind of like cruising, but I mean, a different kind of cruising, because you're going by land to get to your destination in a way. So yeah, I appreciate that aspect of it as well. Whereas when we were growing up, it was mostly like you were saying, we went to the same lake every weekend. And
It was great though.
yes, it was great.
One of my favorite experiences as a kid is when we would all bring our sailboats into the cove and circle them up with the sterns, backwards,
Yeah,
and all of us would be in the middle with our
yeah,
rafts and swimming and causing all sorts of problems, playing hide and seek. I mean, that to me,
yeah.
it was just like we made this pool with these sailboats, and that was just what we did all day till we got hungry, and then we could go on any boat and eat anything.
Yes. So I think that they call that a compass rose when boats tie stern in like that.
Yeah.
I,
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I think
Yeah,
that's
I have
what
no
it's.
idea.
And yeah, that was something that I think it was like July 4th. We did it maybe, or maybe Labor Day. I can't remember. I'm thinking July
Both.
4th. It was pretty warm. I remember, but yeah, people would make an hors d'oeuvre or appetizer, and it used to just get passed. Everybody would pass it around from boat to boat and stuff,
Yeah.
and like we'd all be swimming in the middle of that. Exactly. It felt like a swimming pool. And I
Yeah.
remember one time with you, we used to have a blow up dinghy, with like the rubber benches, and
Oh, yeah.
like you would go to row it, and like the sides of the boat would like kind of cave in because you didn't have enough
It had a
stern.
slow leak.
and then and then I remember we used to flip them upside down, and then
Yeah.
we would swim up underneath and breathe the
Yeah.
air.
Yeah.
And I remember doing that with you for the very first time, and I was so like totally freaked out. And you were like, oh, this is cool. And I'm like, ah, so
A little claustrophobic.
funny. Yeah, I totally
Yeah.
was. But
Well, that's no different than like when we'd escape the center and you'd start swimming on the sides of the boats, and a power boat would come by and start moving the boats. You're like, ooh, maybe this was not a good idea.
yeah, I was worried about getting crushed a little
Yeah.
bit, but we still did it. I totally remember doing that too, swimming in between them. And I don't know. I miss the days of having no fear in a way like that sometimes, because now with the adult brain, it's just like every scenario kind of clocks through your mind about, well, this could happen and that could happen. And okay, I'm not going to do it. And it's just, I miss the childlike kind of approach to life sometimes, because
Just being naive, right? What
ignorance
happens,
is
happens.
bliss. Oh my gosh, those are some really great times. I think another fun time for me that I have fond memories of is when we were really young. People used to, in that same cove, they used to, instead of anchoring out, we used to beach the boats.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was like a little area that was kind of like a beach, if you want to call it that.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. And we'd build a bonfire.
Yeah.
And we'd cook
Did
marshmallows.
somebody have a tire swing at one time?
Yeah, so there was. So like that shoreline where we would, beach the boats, and we would stay overnight on the beach. We didn't we just all were kind of tied up, beached up together on the shore. But there was a tire swing that was kind of in the like if our boats were on the shore and then you looked over across the cove, there was
Oh yeah, it was on the other side.
Yeah, hanging from this giant tree. I mean, and I remember kids. I mean, well, I never did, But I do remember, like, I think kids who like were camping there, because there's a lot of campgrounds around that area as well.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that's probably who those kids were that were swinging off of that. But that's gone now. It's not. I remember going in there like 4 summers ago or something.
Does it look a lot smaller since you've been in there recently? Does it look a lot smaller now that you're an adult?
That's the thing. Like the whole lake. In fact, I was just looking at some sailing footage this morning earlier of sailing at Rathbun, and I thought, and I remember feeling like this last year too on the bigger boat, because on the Legacy, you don't go as far because it's a smaller boat, shorter water line, not as much square footage of sail. So it depends what kind of boat too, right? But anyway, my point is that we sailed a lot faster in the bigger boat. And to the point of where I'd be like, it's time to tack again already. Or I'd be like, yeah, I just want to just keep going,
Right.
And I was just thinking, man, this seems like such a small lake to me now, and it's weird because like as a kid, I of course didn't think that, but now I'm like thinking, man, I gotta like get me some bigger bodies of water to sail on because I just want to keep going. I don't even want to, I have that kind of wanderlust in me, I think to some extent, where I just want to go and just keep sailing. And like, I feel like kind of, while I'm very blessed to be able to sail, period, and it's just day sailing, like I said, there's this part of me that really, as I've talked to you, I think that we're looking to possibly relocate this year to potentially the East Coast, which would be great because it would be, near the ocean. And you can sail pretty far with that.
Yes, you
if
can.
You want to.
Well, it's just like the Great Lakes.
Yeah. And that is actually where, to be honest with you, I would prefer to be going. But my only drawback is that it's so cold, in the wintertime, and that you can't keep your boat in the water year round. Otherwise, I would so be there in a heartbeat because I love the Great Lakes. Yeah. I love where that whole area is just unbelievably gorgeous and so maritime-y. I love all that, every aspect of it. It's just the darn winters are too darn cold. It's the only thing that keeps me. But I guess if you like ice fishing or ice sailing, you're in the right place.
I don't know if you remember this, but when we were growing up, there was a fleet of ice racing boats, and at Big Creek, as a matter of fact. And we knew somebody that had one, and I got to go out as a little kid. I also got to put on my skates and hold on behind the boat like I was bumper sliding or something. It was more fun ice sailing than being behind the boat on ice skates, let me tell you.
I had absolutely no idea that you did that, nor did I have any absolutely idea about ice sailing going on. I actually watched a video on that not too long ago, and from what I gleaned from that, it looks pretty dangerous, actually. Like you get going super fast. And like if you wipe out, it's like I hear, I know who was telling me all this too, is that when I went up 2 summers ago to Lake Minnetonka and I did my American Sailing Association courses. Remember I was telling you I was up there for a couple times, and the lady that runs the sailing school up there, it's called Sail Away Sailing School, Captain Joan Gilmore, I think is her name. Anyway, so she was talking about the wintertime ice sailing around there, and she's like, no way, you would never get me on one of those things are dangerous. And you, like, I think she said some people like get up to 80 miles an hour or something, some ungodly and then if they wipe out, it's like, just it sounds pretty scary, but at the same time it's probably pretty fun.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of my experience racing Hobie Cats, where my wife and I were on the trapeze. This was actually at Rathbun. Our group was just down there camping out and having fun. And and we were both on the trapeze, and I somersaulted the boat. I buried the hull. That thing flipped. My wife swung around and smacked her mouth on the mast. And I think her last words were, "Take me back. I want a Bloody Mary."
Holy cow. Wow.
Yeah. And then I went out and dumped it 2 more times because I didn't have enough weight. It was blowing.
Wow. So let's start talking about that then. So because like I do remember your mini fish. I think in fact you took me out on a sunset sail at one point on it when you first got it, and then I remember in high school you got the laser.
We were
right?
small. We both fit.
Yeah, I never got on your laser, but
No?
yes, we were little tykes
Yeah.
on the mini fish. So
Yeah.
I did that one I remember, but I want to say the laser was more in high school, or was it junior high? Maybe I can't remember.
I would say middle. Yeah. Junior high for sure.
Yeah, there wasn't any racing you did on that boat though, right? Wasn't that just more recreational?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so after when you went to college, were you sailing at all then, or not really? Yeah.
No, it was
So
after college. It was after college, and probably in 1992, I think we joined the fleet of Hobie Cats, and there was a pretty decent sized fleet at Sailorville, just outside of Des Moines. And yeah, we'd race there every weekend, and it was a blast.
So how did you like decide to get into Hobie Cat? So instead of going like with like the FJs or the small dinghy sailors, the scows and whatnot.
It was the only fleet I could find. I think they raced a lot of the scows, and like at Okoboji, and that was 4 hours away. But they had, and I bought this Hobie Cat. I'd never sailed a Hobie Cat before. The first time I put the boat in the water, I realized that it doesn't tack the same way, and I had to go all the way to the other side. Like I just jumped on, like I know how to sail. I'm just going to jump on. I had to go all the way to the other side of the lake, flip the boat around, and sail back. Then I was like, yeah, I better figure out how to tack the boat because it's different.
So in what ways? I mean, I know it's kind of hard to probably. I mean, I've never been on a Hobie Cat or a catamaran of any kind that I can. Oh, I take that back. I was on a catamaran on a sunset cruise. Speaking of sunsets cruises in San Francisco, but it was a gigantic catamaran, like probably 50 something feet. So totally different, I'm sure, from sailing a Hobie Cat. Hobies are what, like 16, 18? What was yours?
16.
Okay.
The Hobie Cat's a lot like the pontoon when you're trying to take it off the trailer. If there is a current or there is wind, it's like a semi. It just has a mind of its own. So you wrangle it off the trailer and you walk it over to the beach and you put all your sails up and another, I can tell you all the bad experiences I had. Another time, this was on a race day, and those Hobie Cats, they all had these beautiful colored sails, and you'd put them up on the beach backwards so you could get on and just go out into the water. And I don't know what I did, but I didn't. The mainsail or the jib or something was still cleated in. Big gust of wind came, took the boat, and it ran it right into somebody else's boat, put a nice hole in their hull. The good news is it was the owner of the Hobie Cat store who also did repair. I felt awful, but yeah, he learned a lesson that day.
Yeah, that's the thing, like about fast boats, is that you don't have as much time to recuperate from a mistake, right? Yeah. It's just kind of like,
and then Michelle, on a Hobie Cat, where your weight is on the boat is extremely important. I mean, it's extremely important when you're racing, especially if you're harnessed up. because you want to get those boats out of the water, you want to cruise, but you need to be balanced. But you get too far forward and you bury that hull, and it's a disaster.
Based upon your experience with the Hobie sailing and then sailing on monohulls, because you've sailed on larger,
Yeah.
like keel boats and dinghy sailing, do you have a preference for? I mean, I know you said when you retire, you said a mast, but I don't think you said what kind of sailboat. Do you have a preference for what kind of sailing or that you like the best out of, because you've got a varied background in it?
Well, I don't think I will have a boat that will have a cabin, right? So, and it won't be a Hobie Cat. I'll tell you that. I'm not. I don't have that much energy, and I'm not as daring as I used to be.
Not up for the athletic sailing, are we?
I am not. No. So yeah, it'll probably be a monohull, some form of a day sailor, I would think. Big cockpit so you can bring grandchildren or whatever in there.
Let me do my little compact
Spiel.
dealership spiel. Right. So my Legacy, like I said, is 16 foot 6 inches, and it's got a cabin. However, they make a day sailor version of that boat that has a gigantic cockpit, and it's a beautiful boat. It's called the Legacy Sport. So I'll send you the specs on it, because it's a comfortable. It's not the kind of boat that's gonna like scare the pants off of someone who's not understanding, like, okay, the boat's heeling a little bit, it's cool, don't worry about it.
Right.
It's going to give you a nice comfortable ride, but still I think have some level of performance too. I've not personally sailed one. I have some friends who have had those boats and really have a lot of great things to say about them, but it would be a real versatile way to go, I think, if you are looking for that kind of. When you said large cockpit, that's what made me think of that boat, although I know there's plenty of other Catalinas and Hunters that have that have that same sort of configuration with a larger cockpit like that. But anyway, I did interrupt you, so tell me again. So you would do a monohull, large cockpit, any size length that you're thinking in particular?
16-ish. Yeah, my last boat I think was day sailor. I can't even remember what it was, but big cockpit, main jib, sailed nice. I always seem to get out there by myself on the windiest days. That back in the day we didn't have a weather app. Now you have a weather app. You know what the wind's going to be. But I'm just like, I got this day off. Let's go. And that's completely like, of all of our sailing experiences, racing in the San Juan 24, obviously one of the favorites. But also just the high from Hobie Cat racing is unbelievable. Those boats are fast, and you can catch people and you can get caught, and if you make a mistake, it could be costly, but that, to me, so I was in my 20s when we raced Hobie Cats, and to me that was the most exhilarating type of racing, because when we were with our parents, even on the 24s, 26, 28s, it was competitive and people were serious. Like, I always loved to go to the racing meetings, and everybody had their game face on. It's like all these people were partying and having fun and all this stuff the night before. The next day, they're different people. I don't know if they were hungover or what, but they were just ready, and you could feel a vibe and an energy on the docks before you went out there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I totally remember that.
Did you ever go on
awesome.
Like the committee boats? Even being on the committee boat.
I never did. I never did committee boat, but I remember like the captains or briefings before the race, and it was totally like you said. It was like people were super serious about it, and there were people who like trailered in. Like, do you remember the Hark Raiders, and they had a Santana 20 that was like this orange colored hull.
Oh, I remember it completely.
And then there was another Santana 20 that trailered in that had like I think like a blue hull. And then I remember Craig Crummer had a San Juan 24 that was
Yellow.
like your guys. Yeah,
Bumblebee.
yellow.
Yeah.
And Sharp Cheddar, I think was what he called the boat, if I remember
Yes, it was.
correctly. And everybody had their colorful spinnakers. And I always remember I couldn't wait for that downwind leg of the race so people would put the chutes up. And it was just, but it was like exactly like what you said. There was just whole air like on the docks in the morning of race day. Then you go to the meeting and you have the briefing. And then my other favorite part of it was like right before you go across the starting line, everybody's jockeying for the best position and starboard or whatever. It was just like, it was so, nobody was ever an asshole about it. I mean, maybe there might have been a couple of occasions, but for the most part, like people were civil and, they weren't being dangerous about it.
It would be different though. There was the races and then there were the regattas. Because the regattas, there was some asinine stuff happening, people getting flipped the bird, people running into each other at the starting line. I mean, it was heated.
Okay, I do not remember that at all. So, but maybe that's because you were
maybe that was just on my boat.
Well, your boat was. You guys were always really so. Like just to bring this part up of racing too, because it's my experience of racing is less by far than not even anything close to what yours is. But one of the things I do remember is like getting back to the whole, one race with all kinds of different boats that are participating rather than a fleet of boats of the same make and whatever, one design, or I think is what they might call it, I guess. But, there's what is it? Some like PHF or there's some sort of a rating system that is so like, for example,
equalizes the boat size and speed and all of that. Yeah.
So you might finish across the finish line first, but somebody might finish behind you, but they actually win the race. Yep. And I can't remember what that rating thing is called, but it's exactly that. It's a way to kind of level the playing field. But getting back to the asinine stuff, I don't really remember, but like I said, our boat wasn't a very fast boat compared to like the San Juan 24s. And I seem to remember it was always the Santana 20s and the San Juan 24s that were taking the trophy at the regattas. So you probably experienced a lot more excitement because your family had one of the fast performing boats, whereas our boat, we had a very slow, I mean, it wasn't super slow, but it was a heavy displacement, really, it was like made for ocean sailing. So it wasn't real lightweight and nimble.
It didn't have a sleek hull. It had a round.
She was like a 9-foot beam on a 26-foot boat, which is a pretty big.
That's why it had such a great cabin. Like our San Juan 24 was small and basic. The cabin was. You should. I'm gonna give you a little street cred here. I think this is really important for your viewers. It's not a great story for me, but we had a lot of chatter on the dock one day. And that chatter was about the boys could beat the girls in a sailboat race any day of the week. And we went to our parents and convinced them. How old were we? 12? And
I think 14. I want to say 13 or 14. I think it was between 8th and 9th grade. Something like that.
I have no idea. But what I do know is that my stepbrother and I, in a Pace Ship 26, raced you and your buddy in. Did you have Marnie's boat? Was that it? Yeah. So you had a Catalina 27, right? The orange one, right?
Yeah, it was Marnie's Catalina 27. It used to belong to Clancy. Do you remember Clancy?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he was quite the character. Other,
So we got out of the marina. So it's just us kids. And we get out of the marina and we are going to race down to the cove. And I don't remember. I don't think we raced back. I don't remember how it ended. All I know is for the entire race, we were watching you two ahead of us.
yeah. So, so as I recall that day, it was, I think we actually sailed down to South Fork and back. I think it might not have been, you know what? I think it was to Rangers Point, maybe. It might have been like halfway down.
Yeah.
I don't think it was South Fork because that would have been like an all day thing. But I'm pretty sure
I thought it was. We just raced down towards
Honey Creek.
The Honey Creek State Park, and once we got in there, that was the winner.
I don't know.
All I know is we lost, and then we accused you guys of running your engine.
Yes, I do remember that.
But it wasn't a windy day. It wasn't terribly windy.
No,
it was just a run.
But you know what? That's the way it always is there too, actually. It's always like a run either out or a run on the way back down to Buck Creek, back to the marina. But yeah, I remember that day, Marnie's father was down below in the cabin, and he just minded his own business, and he let us two just have the boat to ourselves. And I don't
know. Britt and I had parents.
Well, so they were there on the boat with you?
No.
Oh well, yeah. Her father. See, this just goes to show level of trust, right? Because her father was in the cabin below, but he didn't do anything. But I will tell you that there was also a time I was older. I think I was out of high school. I don't remember if I was a freshman or sophomore in college, but my father, here's a testament to his trust in me because the boat was his baby, but he let me take the boat out by myself with Marnie, again, my friend Marnie, our friend Marnie. And then I had two other friends, one of whom actually his father owned the second sailboat dealership in Des Moines. He sold the McGregors, which is where we got our first boat. And then he also sold a brand of boat called American. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah.
And
where was he located?
He was down by Waterworks Park.
Oh, okay.
And his name was Ron too, funnily enough. So two Rons that had two sailboat establishments in the Des Moines area. But anyway, his son was one of the other people on the boat. So it was myself, Marnie, this guy's son, and then another friend of ours. And we used to keep our boat on a mooring. Do you remember there was usually lots more moorings than there were docks or slips available on the docks? So most people actually moored their, but I think you guys did too. You had a mooring, right?
I think with the San Juan, we had a slip.
Oh.
But I don't remember. I know the Pace ship had it. Pace ship had a mooring for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we used to, part of the fun of being down at the lake is I'd go over and work the gas dock for free. And I'd take people out to their boats. It was awesome because they get so busy. And I'm like, I'll take them.
Yeah, no. Well, that was the complaint that my dad always had, is that we would honk the horn thing for them to come pick us up, and we'd be waiting. And then finally that Chris, remember Chris, the owner's son of the marina, he would come over, and
he was my buddy.
They had those busted up old John boats, that they would, and I remember my dad always getting upset that they would mar up the boat, so Marnie and I and the two other guys, we went out on my dad's boat, took the boat off the mooring. I knew the engine, everything. I had full. It was like I've been sailing on the boat for over 10 years. So I mean, I know this sounds really absolutely obnoxious to say this, but I could have sailed that boat around the world. I felt so confident in myself and my ability in the boat. I knew that boat like the back of my hand. And it's, get out there, raise the sails. We had a great time. We sailed down to the cove where we had the compass rose things and anchored out. And then lo and behold, I think I was on deck messing around with the anchor or something. And then all of a sudden there's this commotion in the cabin. And I kind of, get back as fast as I can. And the two dudes who were on the boat with us had, for whatever reason, thought it would be fun to light the stove inside the cabin, the little alcohol stove that you pump it.
Oh yeah.
They singed part of the curtains.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
just a little tiny bit of it. And I was absolutely furious because I never gave them permission to, they just, teenage boys. You were one yourself once, right?
I do.
But
Obnoxious little
anyway,
fools.
I never told my father about the incident because like I said, it was just a little teeny singe on the curtains, but it could have been a freaking disaster, brother. I'm telling you, I was never so freaked out. Well, it's one of the most times I've ever been super freaked out in my life. I was irate that they did that because, here my dad placed his trust in me to take the boat out and I could bring friends along. Oh my God, Brian, that was just, I get really upset about it because I just, things could have gone real bad, real fast, a lot, you know what I mean? So
You ought to tell your dad now. Get it
no
off your
way.
chest.
I would never.
You should do it. You
I'm
should
not
do it. It'll
gonna
make you
tell
feel
him.
better.
I'm not going to tell him about this episode either. Like, I don't want him to know. I'm so
I'm going
ashamed.
to send it to him.
But you better not. But at any rate, yeah, we did have that race, and yes, we did kick your ass. By the way.
Yeah. Trust me.
Well,
I've been beaten. I've been beaten in races before. That one stung the most.
Well, I want you to think back to when you started racing as by yourself, not with your family and such, but how you learned. I guess mostly you learned probably as a kid. But if you were to give advice to someone who's interested in learning about racing, or how would you recommend someone go about learning about how to race a sailboat, and what would you tell them?
Well, the era in which we grew up in, there was very little information as there is today. There are so many videos, but I would just say do your research. First of all, do your research in what sort of racing that you want to do, because the boat that you buy, determines, your end goal, right? So it's about the boat. The next thing is racing available? I think I told you the other day that, the boat shop up here that's 10 minutes away from me went out of business, or they sold it to, another boat shop. But they ran a program for kids, to teach them how to sail, a sailing school, so to speak. So, there's not a lot of that, but what there is a lot of is a lot of information. And I think, we got into it just naturally because of how we grew up and we knew how to sail, and we were, near the right lakes, and there were fleets available that you could go race against. So a lot of it is research. And, it's funny too, because sailboats are very inexpensive to buy. Now, what you get out of that, sometimes you don't always know. I think you've had a couple experiences in that, right? Where you look, you think, you see, you like, then you have it, what tested or not?
A survey.
Survey. And then you're like, oh crap, it's not what I thought it was. But
Right.
then, but like any hobby and any sport, there's so many things that you can do to rig your boat. So it's faster. The sails today are amazing, right? They're just a whole new technology. You think about even some of the, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but some of the races of the United States versus New Zealand and all of those boats, and to see them out of the water, to see the types of sails. I mean, it is unbelievable compared to how we grew up and what
Yeah.
we raced and all of that. So yeah, that my number one advice is do your research, and make sure you know what you're getting yourself into.
If you were to recommend a type of boat to start off learning to race or sail on, I mean, because you're going to want to learn to sail before you learn to race, I would assume. It would make sense.
That'd be helpful.
Would you say monohull, or would you say if you have this interest in racing Hobies, just start right out with a Hobie Cat?
Hmm. No, I would say monohull. I mean, most people learn how to sail on a monohull just to begin with, and um, the scows. There's still quite a number of scow fleets that are out there. It'd probably be nice 16 to 18. Obviously, the scows, they different sizes, different names, different complications. I think there's still a fleet in Northwest Iowa that race up there, but it's a solid boat, and you have a better opportunity of racing a boat against your own class.
It's like you were saying, it's kind of like it's all kind of depends upon where you want to go, what you want to do. This season for me, I plan to race my boat for the very
Good for
first
you.
time. Yep, in the little series races that our yacht club has, but I'm doing it because I think it's good for you to learn to think fast under maybe duress, right? Because at the starting line, we all know it can be pretty nutty. Making decisions of where the wind's coming from, what's the best way to attack getting at this next mark. There's all sorts of things that I think will help a sailor to increase their skill sets. And that's really more why I'm looking to do it, not because I'm hoping to win a trophy or something. It's just, I want to challenge myself and my skills. And so I think that's one way that I can grow as a sailor is by going to this next available opportunity that is available in sailing. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, you think about it, racing with your parents and being on the crew is different than racing on your own, right? You're taking command, and you're taking all of your knowledge and putting it out there for an afternoon or a morning, right? So yeah, I'm proud of you. That's a great next step for you. And whatever, like you say, whatever, if you keep your expectations right, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not really a competitive person by any means, never have been. But I think, again, the benefit I see in it is increasing my knowledge and experience, putting myself into situations that might make me nervous. And I don't know, I think it's important to challenge ourselves, not just with even, sailing, but in anything in life, really. It's just kind of how I feel I grow as a person is by making myself do things that scare me, like being afraid of flying and taking flying lessons, that sort of thing, I did do that, by the way.
If you need somebody to come down and crew for you that you get to yell at and
no yelling,
or order
no
around, I'm in.
Well, I would love to have you come down sail with me one day again, Brian. I think that would be a wonderful thing. We have such a history and a shared history at that, so it would be extraordinarily special, although I know it is far for you to get here. But you know what? Like, that's what I'm saying about the trailerable sailboat is I thought about taking up the boat to the Apostle Islands, or maybe I could even take it up to like where the picture behind you, I mean, there's all sorts of great sailing up where you are. So I would, I might just have to do that.
They do race on Lake Pepin, which is on the Mississippi River. I don't know. I don't know what the distance is for me, but it's probably 45 minutes by car. But yeah, there's a couple nice marinas there, and they race probably the size of boats that our parents raced when we were down at Rathbun.
Yeah, that sounds a lot of fun. Where you are, yeah, there's so much. And I do have to say, kind of sailing on a river makes me nervous. but I think that would be another thing that would be good to challenge my skills, to do that.
Yeah,
You have
well,
to
don't think of a river as a river. I mean, this is the Lake Pepin is on the river, but it's a lake, and the reason why the boats sail there is it's really wide open, and when the wind is honking, it's a breezy, fast day. Fun to see.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good. I'll look forward to, you know, um, doing my research and kind of trying to figure out what might be up there for me to explore and come up there with charisma and do a little sailing. It's been great to take a walk down memory lane, as well as I learned some new things about you that I didn't know. And I'm glad that we could talk about some of the Hobie experience that you've had and racing experiences, because I've been really dying to get someone on the show who has a background in that, because like I said, I don't really, and I think it can be a very big part of sailing, and that's why a lot of people enjoy sailing, is because of racing. So I think it's a good topic to have on and discuss.
Well, the beautiful thing about sailing is it can be whatever you want it to be, right? It
Right.
can be relaxing. It can be fast and furious. Just a quick story before we get out of here. My daughter had lived in San Francisco, and she had an opportunity to go on a friend's boat and race in the bay. And when you were talking about, which was something she's never done before, that sort of sailing. And the other thing too, going back to the sailing clubs, they have Marina Yacht Club there. And one of the times I was out there, I was able to watch the smaller kids at the sailing school, just the cutest little boats, and just doing whatever they do and making mistakes and learning. A really cool experience. But yeah, sailing can be anything that you imagine, as you imagine it to be, or anything that you want it to be.
You couldn't say it any more beautifully than that. That it's just a perfect. It captures it all. The soul of sailing. That's exactly it. The beauty of sailing, or just being on the water in general, whether it's a sailboat, a powerboat, a canoe, a kayak. There's a vessel for everyone,
Yes.
and
Well said.
And it just, all you got to do is just get out there, right, and enjoy.
Be one with nature. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, I'm so grateful and thankful to you, and I'm very blessed that you've been part of my life. It's really cool to be able to be in one another's lives once again. So thank you.
Absolutely. We'll be in touch.
Sounds good. Okay. Thank you, and fair winds, my friend.
Fair winds.
Thank you so much for stopping by to watch and take a listen. I hope you enjoyed this episode with my childhood sailing friend, Brian Nicholson. It was so fun to travel down memory lane with Brian to revisit some of our earliest sailing memories, as well as delve into some of Brian's sailing experiences with racing Hobie Cat sailboats. I can't wait to get out this season to learn to race with my Compact 23 SV Charm. In doing so, I'm sure to unlock so many more treasures waiting for me to discover within this soul of sailing. If you're enjoying my videos and new podcast series, please consider supporting a regular gal, me, along her journey of learning all things sailing by following my website, passagesfromtheheart.wordpress.com, and also by subscribing to this YouTube channel. Until next time, fair winds.